Wales v Scotland, which is going to take place on Saturday at 2:15, the curtain raiser for the whole Super Saturday that is. And then usually it's going to be in Parc Y Scarlets in Llanelli. Which is quite an unusual place for a Six Nations game, but then similar to the Champions Cup final a few weeks ago in Ashton Gate, you can do it there because there's no fans going to be in attendance.
Well, so it's true, but it is an interesting factor and an interesting dynamic, the location. Wales obviously used to the Millennium Stadium where you can close the roof, and while, weather forecasts are by no means an exact science, it is by some accounts at least going to be a wet and windy one on Saturday, and that is going to affect the game.
For sure, yeah. Just in other things about it, Andrew Brace is the referee for that one. I suppose we'll get into the colour of the game because there's a lot to, even though it's kind of a dead rubber in the context of the competition, just the delay in the staggered nature of the season means that these teams are kind of starting their season with the Autumn Nations Cup coming up rather than finishing it, even though it is the finish to the Six Nations. So it has a lot to play for both of these teams, just in terms of building that momentum into a new tournament this autumn.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at this from Wales's point of view, this game takes on a massive significance. It is, as you say, the start of their season, but the PVAC era has gotten off to a pretty
rocky start.
You're not looking a good start now after an opening day win against Wales. The sort of imperious defensive mindset that sort of characterised the Sean Edwards Warren Gatland team of last year more or less disintegrated overnight, and very few residuals of it were left, and now they've lost. They found themselves getting into shootout games with top teams. Ireland Ireland was one of the lower scoring ones, but England as well, France as well, twice, and lost all four of them.
To be fair, a little like his Scarlets outfit prior to them, and this will take place in Parc Y Scarlets, where, as you say, they've been managing to create shootouts, which it was no different in the friendly game against France the other week. It looked like another shootout, and it was just one that they lost, and that's been happening to them quite a lot. Yeah, their defence from being so stout and so resilient and so adaptable, they were the team that kind of stalled into a stalemate with the now world champions South Africans in the semi-final. And we're very close to winning that game as well, based entirely on their defence. Certainly from an Irish point of view, we used to struggle mightily to try and break them down because of their tackling and their just very, very clever defensive reads, specifically in the Northern Hemisphere as well. Sometimes there were doubts about their 13 channel, but we didn't really test them there. But now that has been replaced by a completely new look with a lot of the same players, but just a completely different style, different tempo of game, very little control from halfbacks. Just they don't seem to be able to get a handle on the game.
Certainly, the incumbent selection of Rhys Webb and Dan Biggar, which was the two that were going into it before this game, were struggling a little for form, and we're definitely struggling to control the game. I think they had issues, generally speaking, with game management, defence, obviously, and the tight five as well, that would be in an urgent need of addressing. And that is one of the key factors that they'll be looking at going into this game in terms of improving their squad. But also just, you can't, going 1-5 on the season with just a win against.
Suddenly PVAC's position's under pressure with that. You can't have it
he's got a Nations Cup group coming up with England and Ireland in it. If those two games are lost as well, Wavac's going to be under massive pressure. PVAC, I should say. Wavak. He's going to be under massive pressure going into next year, and that's just not something that Wales need. I think there's nuggets and shoots of goodness to them. They can still take a try, but fixing their issues and certainly beating Scotland, they have a good home record against Scotland, should be enough to dial them in and not have the season spiral on them as old Welsh teams have done.
Yes, it's true. But then just to pivot from Scotland's point of view in terms of the colour of this game, things are kind of surprisingly upbeat considering where they were 12 months ago in the World Cup.
I would even said 6 months ago. Well, maybe not 6 months ago, whatever bleeding month it is this year. Who knows? But back in February, they were coming off that horrific situation in the World Cup where they've been knocked out by Japan. They kind of embarrassed themselves in other ways. Stuffed by Ireland, well beaten by Japan. When it looked like the Japanese game was going to be called off, they were sticking the chests out and calling lawsuits and everything else. And we were like, "What? Relax, all right. We're going to play the game." And I think they ended up charging one of their executives or one of their directors who were giving out the beans about World Rugby. I think they ended up sanctioning them in some way for doing that.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty disastrous campaign from top to bottom.
They went and lost that game, and then at the very start of this year, Gregor Townsend looked like he was on his way out.
Yeah.
Finn Russell had been had a falling out with them, and was dropped from the squad. Far and away the best player that they have in their squad. He was out of situation. They decided, Gregor decided, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to put all my faith in Stuart Hogg. I'm going to make him captain. He's going to be my star. He's going to rescue the season. And then 2 games against Ireland and England. What an awful schedule to have to start a season and a World Cup cycle with. Both of which they played very well, but 2 key errors from Captain Hogg cost them the wins in those games, or at least push those games beyond their reach.
Yeah.
And things look to be thoroughly in the doldrums 2 weeks in.
Yeah, but then they managed to dig it out of the fire. A great win against France. And just they've managed now, certainly coming off last week with Finn back in the picture. A new attacking dimension is in there, but then really where the news is at is in their tight 5 situation, like the depth they have. We were waiting to start the shoot of this podcast, waiting for the squads to come out, and just like having a read of that Scotland squad, it's a completely different outfit in tight. Like Rory Sutherland has come off bullying both the English, like Sinclair and Furlong in Ireland and England.
Rory Sutherland is taking absolute names. I mean, I think he can comfortably put the Irish, English and Georgian scrum as having been put in his back pocket and bested in 3 games this season. I mean, he's absolutely taking names. He's come in and it feels like the pivot from Scotland having a tight 5 that couldn't really compete with the top teams to one that's as good as any of them has happened suddenly. And it's just sort of been triggered and snowballed by the arrival back of Rory Sutherland, who had a long-term injury for so long, but he's come back in and he looks in incredible form, and he looks like he has the potential to become the best loose head in the world, and that's big talk. But he's not there yet, but he's close. He has the potential, I would say, at least to get there. And then we've always known that they had good locks who could take the step up, knocking around. You got Skinner,
you have Grays, you have
Cummings, then you had Gilchrist and Toulis, who were the incumbents from Edinburgh for so long, and you had the 2 Gray brothers. Usually many of them were injured or out of form, and this year they've come into it in stellar form, and they've got Ollie Kebble now qualified and coming into the team.
That's right.
The depth is actually staggering in that tight 5 area, and they were comfortably competing in wet and hard games, especially the one in Murrayfield against England. They were not bested up front there. They were kind of outsmarted. But in that game they matched the English pack. In the Irish game they matched the Irish pack. In the French game they bested the French pack. So this is a forward pack that's very, very comfortable, operating at a high level with a lot of physicality. They weren't bothered at all by Georgia last week.
No, they were not. And this will also be a good one to try and get a feather in their cap. It is a dead rubber, but historically they have a terrible record in Wales in terms of just getting one over on their neighbours there. So this is a good chance for them to put their hands up and do it. And another one I see you have here, Scotland haven't won 3 games in a row in the Six Nations since 1996. Which would be a nice thing to scrub out as a stat.
It would.
Because whatever about Grand Slams, you can't win a Grand Slam without 3 games in a row, and they haven't won 3 games in a row in the comp since '96. That's
since before I was born.
Yeah, well there you go.
I would have been born that autumn.
Yeah. So between that and the warm up for the Autumn Nations, I think both teams will have a lot to play for. 100%. Wales will take confidence from their home record against their neighbours, feeling they have one up, but Scotland will feel like they have a bit more momentum to take in,
100%.
And will be targeting the game too.
Yeah, and can finish as high as 3rd, I think, Scotland. And they'd be good for it after a rocky start. Like I say, they've come back.
Yeah, for sure. And so we'll pivot to the squads. Obviously, we did look quite at the Scottish type 5 there, but I suppose we can kind of.
Yeah, no, we'll just the sides were named obviously this morning and this afternoon as we filmed this on Thursday. So Wales have gone with Rhys Carré, Ryan Elias, Thomas Francis in the front row, Will Rowlands and Alan Wynne-Jones in the second row. Shane Lewis-Hughes makes his debut at 6 from Cardiff. Tipperick and Faletau 7 and 8, not surprising. Gareth Davis comes in to replace Rhys Webb. At 9, Dan Bigger in at 10. Owen Watkin gets Nick Tompkins' jersey, comes into the centre with Jonathan Davis. And Liam Williams returns, I should say, on the wing. With Lee Halfpenny at fullback. Am I missing a winger there? I think I am.
Perhaps.
Josh Adams, I assume. I haven't got him down here. I think it's Josh Adams on the other wing. No place in the squad for Louis Rees-Zammit, I should say. The replacements are Sam Parry, who's still yet to start.
He's going to be a debutant starter, but he's actually 28 years old. He's kind of had a late bloomer in terms of his calibre, and with Ken Owens obviously out with a relatively long-term injury, they're kind of mixing it up in terms of that hooker role as well.
Wyn Jones and Dylan Lewis are the two bench props. Corey Hill covers at lock, obviously with Will Rowlands coming in from Wasps. James Davis covers the back row where they have something of an injury crisis. Lloyd Williams covering at 9. Reece Patchell at 10, covering 10, and Nick Tompkins covering the outside backs.
Yes.
Which means no place for Louis Rees-Zammit in the team.
Yeah, big talking points. I'm excited to see Rowlands. I think he's been brilliant for Wasps this year. I think he will add a lot to that second row, and they need... So, like, obviously Alan Wynne-Jones is their stalwart and their incumbent and their legend as well, but they need a few guys to start stepping up in his stead because he won't be around forever, and I think Rowlands could potentially be that. He's been big for Wasps this year.
He has, no question. And they just generally speaking, I think they need some heft in that tight five.
Yeah,
they
brought back Thomas Francis is the other one at tight head, because I think Samson Lee is another one who's out with injury. So
just a head knock for Samson.
Yes, but definitely need more options there, and bringing in an Exeter chief in the tight five.
Yeah, I know he doesn't start for Exeter, but he
comes off. Their bench props are pretty good as well. The good impact. So yeah, excited to see those two introduced. Obviously, Lewis Hughes as well. Don't fully know what to expect from him in the back row. Hopefully he hits the ground running as well. Debuts can go one of two ways. I'm also excited to see the return of Owen Watkin. I always kind of liked Owen Watkin, and I think Nick Tompkins has been a little soft in their centres for him.
Well, I think Wales are struggling to adapt to the idea of not having that barrelling ram, both in offence and defence, in the 12 shirt.
Yes, be it Jamie Roberts or be it Hadley Parks, they've kind of stuck with that template for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And then without the two of them, certainly in the midfield, it was just lacking. It was lacking for any sort of defensive bite. So I think it's very clear to understand where they're coming from with that jersey.
Yeah.
Plus, as exciting as Nick Tompkins is, he's come straight into the Wales team on the back of some good club form, and he wasn't
a regular starter in that Sarries team anyway. He was kind of half on the B team, half on the thing, but he impressed when he did come in enough that they gave him the jersey. So I wouldn't hang him out to dry yet, and he is on the bench to come in.
Yeah.
But he definitely found the step up a little tough in the beginning.
100%. In terms of Scotland and their team, they named theirs this afternoon as well. Not too many surprises in there. Their embarrassment of riches in the tight five boiled down to Sutherland at loose head, Fagerson tight head, Fraser Brown in at hooker. They went for Scott Cummings and Johnny Gray in a lock, and Jamie Ritchie and Mishtafer. Hamish Watson, the Mish. He takes the 7 shirt, unsurprisingly, with Ritchie. And Blade Thompson gets the nod at number 8.
That's an interesting one. He's a big, hefty lad. I do like Blade Thompson.
He's played lock before, I'm pretty sure. So it's interesting to see him in there at number 8.
He's a decent footballer too. I think he could work from there for sure. We'll see how it goes. For him.
Yeah. Price and Russell retain their jerseys at halfback, or I should say not retain, but Russell would be the presumed incumbent, even if he's not the actual incumbent.
Indeed.
But the centres Lang and Harris persist. They persist with those two, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. They've gone with Kinghorn on the left wing, Darcy Graham on the right wing, and Stuart Hogg, which means that Duhan van der Merwe takes his place on the bench. The rest of the bench being McAnally, Kebble, Simon Bergen. That's hell of a front row replacements. Ben Tulis coming off in the lock, super player as well.
Yeah.
Cornell Dupria covering back row. Scott Steele covering scrum half, so no place for George Horn.
That's a big call, I think, as well. And obviously he's a decent Quinn as well, but I like George Horn, to be honest. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I don't think his form was great, but maybe there's an injury there.
Maybe.
But and then obviously the other ones as well, the two backs, Adam Hastings and, as I say, Duhan van der Merwe.
Yes, it's a good team. What else can you say? Scotland are in rude health in their tight five, as we cited, but then with the returning Finn Russell and Stewie Hogg as well, newly crowned double champion Stewie Hogg, European Player of the Year nominee, despite some dubious moments in the Six Nations earlier this year.
Yeah, if you take a look at that Scotland front pack, that pack of forwards, the front 7 really, outside of Blade Thompson who's coming into the team, they do have like a real sort of settled nature about them. Ritchie and Hamish Watson in great form. Hamish Watson wasn't in such great form earlier in the season, but he's come back in great form, and Jamie Ritchie's taken his game, I would argue, to another level this year. And that tight 5 obviously is just so... they're settled, and we've been talking about them all day. They've managed to compete with that with all the top sides. They managed to compete with Ireland, compete with England, beat France.
Yeah.
It just seems like a pack in a really, really good place. And then, as you say, with Finn Russell and Hogg coming back, it does give them the other attacking dimension. I think the area that's obviously the one of most concern from a Scottish point of view is those two centres. With it was Sam Johnson and Hugh Jones in years gone by, and they seem to have fallen out of favour, and now Lang and Harris
are the guys in the now, but they've never really lit it up in the centres, to be honest. In recent years, it's been a little kind of part of a little weakness for them.
England in 2018 and in 2019, to be fair, those are the England games.
Those England games for sure, but then even in those England games there was some softness through the middle that was present too. Like they've not been the full finished article in that centres, and considering how strong that tight 5 and tight 7, as you say, is, and including the bench options there's good impact there. The centres is a point in this Scotland team that you'd cite as a bit of a weakness. But then Wales aren't particularly settled there themselves, so it'll be interesting to see if they can try and exploit them there. But
it will, and I suppose on that note we should pivot on to actually previewing the game in and of itself. Wales and Scotland taking on. We're going to obviously look at the games from the perspective of each team, and we're going to start with Wales, and specifically when Wales have the ball, what are they going to do in attack?
Well, yeah, they've as we kind of highlighted earlier on, they've been missing a little bit of control in with their ball in hand play. They haven't really, they've tested teams, they've strung together some nice sequences of play, which is good. But the halfbacks, Webb and Bigger, they've both been a little bit middling with their kicking. It's been certainly not assured and very kind of loose at times, and it's that's what instigates these shootouts, which Scotland with Finn Russell and Hogg back in the team are more than confident and comfortable in a shootout.
Well, I think having Gareth Davis come in for Webb is big in a few areas, and while he's not the most controlling scrum half, you would say, what he does bring is tempo, and what he does bring is that capacity to sort of move the game around. And I think the inclusions of Thomas Francis and Will Rowlands into the team notwithstanding, there should be an element of caution in the Welsh pack about taking Scotland on up front where they really want to go at it, especially with ball in hand. I certainly think that having Davis in there is going to give them that little bit of impetus to just go wider, to stand wider off the base of the ruck and move Scotland around a little bit, not let them get into the game from a defensive point of view. Yeah,
and try and ask those questions in the centres. They have their Jonathan Davis, they have a lot of confidence in, obviously, try and get it into his hands so he can test those centres out and probe out there, move those Scottish forwards around the pitch that way, and play some Welsh running rugby. You're in Parc Y Scarlets, try and throw the ball around a little bit and try and get a good tempo going. But less looseness is kind of what you'd want to see, because as much as they've put those good sequences together at times under Pivac, and it's looked very, very slick at times, it also can look calamitous. Sometimes they've just been kicking aimlessly or dropping poorly, and they want to kind of stamp that out, get a bit more control. They're at home, they're against their favourites, they're against a team they kind of feel like they should have the kind of Indian sign over. It would just be nice to see a bit more of a mature performance.
Controlling the pill and exercising a bit more control in the game than they have been is going to be crucial. This Wales team is no different than most in that they do have an eye for a try. And you saw that earlier in the year coming back against England. They actually ended up making that a 3-score game, a 3-point game, when at one point it was probably a 3-score game. England had it to bed, and then Wales came back and got the losing bonus point and got right back in it at the very end of the game. They always have those eyes for tries. You saw they scored a couple of nice tries at the weekend against France as well. So they'll definitely fancy themselves. If there's softness in the Scottish defence, they'll definitely fancy themselves. But it's going to be crucial that they move the ball wide in that multi-phase and don't get sucked in. The other thing that has to be considered as well is the weather. And we don't know what it's going to be like, but if it's wet and if it's windy, we may well see a Welsh team that decides that the sort of bigger bombs might be a decent play. As good as Hogg can be and Darcy Graham can be and Blair Kinghorn can be as well. They have their moments under the high ball, and they're certainly worth testing, especially with the accuracy and quality that the Bigger and the likes of Liam Williams bring to proceedings. Well,
with Liam Williams back into the team from the wing, and Halfpenny solid too, but Bigger chasing his own bombs is one of his great resources, one of his great playmaking plays that he does. He's brought it out for years. He's done it against the best teams in the world. It would be nice to see a big game from Bigger. In terms of just
certainly after last week.
He'll be desperate for one. His place kicking was all over the place by the end of it, but it was also, it just wasn't the day for them.
I genuinely think Pivac might have been a bit braver if there wasn't this sort of air of the weather might be absolutely shite hanging over the game, where it's like, And again, like, you never know. It could be, you know, I see the weather every day, so it's going to be terrible here in Dublin where we are, and I look out and it's like, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's a bit windy, but it's not actually raining right now, and you could certainly play a game of rugby in
You
it.
could, yeah.
But there's every chance it lashes down, and in that circumstance, if they'd gone for the likes of Sheedy and Reece Sammet on debut, they could find themselves found out a little bit. So I think they've
frozen
kept
out. Certainly, if you're Reece Sammet, you might not see the pill for a half a rugby. Yeah.
So they've kept Halfpenny, the experienced man at fullback, but brought Liam Williams in, the aerial expert, and kept Bigger in the team. I think with one eye to perhaps laying bombs down on Scotland. So as much as we'd like to see them attacking, and I think we will see some decent attack from them, and I still think that they should be moving wide, moving that Scotland team around, especially off breakdowns, like long passes as opposed to short tight passes, just checking the Scotland defence and making them spread is definitely a crucial thing. But I think when they're deep, certainly in their own territory or even on the halfway line, if it's shite weather, they'll definitely put some air on it.
They will, I definitely think there's every chance for Wales to get on top in this one, but they need to be accurate. First and foremost, they need to kind of minimise just the crazy errors and turnovers that they've been producing with the ball in good positions. They've been doing, like, I have no problem with a bigger bomb. That's a controlled play, even though you're kind of kicking the ball away. Ostensibly you're trying to kick to contest, but sometimes they've just run out of ideas, and other times they've just dropped the ball cold. So a little less of that, a bit more control all told. That's exactly what
and control in terms of managing yourselves in the contact zone. You know, Scotland, they are a jackal threat. They've got Hamish Watson, they've got Jamie Ritchie, they've got Fraser Brown, good jackling turnover
and good tackling kind of players as well. Like the mission, all the whole back row will make their tackles. In fact, the whole front row will make their tackles around the park as well. So a little bit more deception in terms of where you're putting the ball carrier. You can do little tip on passes, get yourself into nice patterns, and then choose the right option. And that is kind of on the halfbacks, but also on the forwards too. Don't be lumbering kind of pointlessly into contact and getting yourself isolated, because Scotland are very good at isolating you or forcing you to even ceding a few yards so that you're away from your support and then getting in. They are kind of divils for that, so they'll need to be mindful of it and try and move them around. And
I do think that the selection at halfback is the right one with Davis. And
I think it's their best. I think it's their best halfback combination. Truth be told, defense, but then when they don't have the ball, when Scotland do manage to turn them over, or they field the high kick that they've put in or something, and Scotland are coming at them, what do they need to do by way of shutting them down?
Well,
more improvements needed for sure. Because their defence, as we said at the start of this, their defence had characterised their Warren Gatland side, and now it's just not that at all. They're not a defensive team at all.
There's all sorts of mad tries being conceded. I mean, the tone was actually set in that first game against Ireland when Nick Tompkins against Jordan Larmour just put in a very soft sort of non-tackle, and Ireland managed to get a try in the lead out of it, where, you know, Wales on the goal line against Ireland in years gone by have been anything but soft. It takes forever to unlock them. And straight away you saw that indication. I think the first port of call from Wales, looking at this game specifically, is in the forward pack. You know, we've been talking bigging up the Scottish forward pack, and I'm sure they're bigging themselves up. They're playing with a lot of confidence, and I think if the weather is kind of poorly, Scotland might fancy themselves, or even if it's not, they might fancy themselves playing just that little bit narrower. You know, if the Finn Russell 30-metre pass isn't on, you might see Scotland take it through a few more phases. They might back themselves, Fraser Brown, Hamish Watson, Jamie Ritchie, they might back themselves to win some contacts. And I think we've known in times gone by that Wales sides have been galvanised by a team trying to do that against them. They can be good at getting out of the line and chopping down receivers and just letting them know there's nothing there for them all day. And they could make it very stale and difficult for Scotland if they can step up and do that.
Well, certainly the debutant in the back row, Lewis Hughes, is it? And also just Rowlands as well is a little bit more heft for them. They will have to do that job. I expect the likes of Rowlands to make all his tackles. Alan Wynne-Jones as well to be very combative in the contact, choke tackling as well. Try and hold those Scottish runners up and turn them over. Those are the kind of big moments that you do see typically out of a wily Welsh team.
Exactly. Like we've seen Scotland actually in recent seasons, we've seen good Scotland teams go away to Wales and get scuppered. And often that's what you see. You know, guys like Hamish Watson who are having big games week in, week out, get no purchase out of a Welsh back row. They're getting tackled for days, and then all of a sudden, after 40 or 50 frustrating minutes, Hamish Watson is dropping balls and giving away opportunities. And Scotland, as good as their new confidence is, it is new confidence, and it can be dented with consistent failures to make inroads in those areas.
Well, just getting repelled at the gain line is so huge. These games tend to be about that gain line battle. So as you say, the up forward kind of the defence is going to be key for them. Then there is danger out wide, obviously. The distributing powers of Finn Russell, even if you do manage to stop all those forward runners, still formidable, still a risk, still able to identify where typically the space has been just outside, in and around the 13 channel, Jay Davis's channel. There's normally, with the previous defensive system, because it was a tight shoot, that was where the space was just outside him. It's a bit less so now. Like, certainly with Watkin coming in, there's even room in the middle there, more so than there had been. It's less sturdy and robust, and Russell is in great form at picking defences apart. Certainly what he did to the Sarries when they had a kind of a hodgepodge centre partnership in for the last quarter of that game, it was just to exemplify that lovely chip identifying the space.
I remember last week watching them play Georgia, and as good as Scotland were for most of that game, when Finn Russell came on, just the different dimension he gave to their attack. They were just floating perfect passes coming from everywhere. He's so good at unlocking the space. And it's a huge job for Jonathan Davis, and it's a huge job for the wingers as well if Wales find themselves getting very narrow. I think we saw Jack Noel get one over on Finn by just watching the ball the whole way through contact and managing to make a read on an intercept, because his passes do spend a long time in the air. But there's all sorts of tricks and dynamics that he brings out in the defence. And can you fool him? Can you steal an intercept off him? Can you get him to chip the ball away?
This is it. Bait him into a false picture so he drops it on the toe incorrectly. All of that is kind of the job of the pendulum in the backfield, but also a lot of it will land squarely at Jonathan Davis's door in terms of defence. Will he be able to shut down that offensive threat? And because that's part two. Once you stop them in the tight, you need to stop Finn Russell's passing game
and his kicking game.
Yeah, and then once that happens, then you're definitely favourites. You've already gone a long way towards unsettling and disrupting this Scotland side. But it's easier said than done.
It is, and I think you can see also the negative picture. I mean, as much as I'd love to see Louis Rees-Zammit in there, I think we were saying in the context of their attack as well, the reason he's out of there at the moment is probably because it might be a wet day and it might be a difficult day and it might be a kicker's day. And Scotland certainly seem to have identified that with Blair Kinghorn, Stuart Hogg and Finn Russell in the team. They can kick very technically and very silkily as well, kick deep in that way. So I think Liam Williams and Lee Halfpenny and Josh Adams, that pendulum has a serious job on their hands in the backfield well as in the in the tight areas with the little fin chips.
For sure. Bomb diffuser job going on. There could be a lot of back and forth kicking, but it'll be minor edges here and there, and hopefully the Welsh new pendulum with Liam Williams back into the side will make a big difference to them.
And hopefully just from a Wales point of view, if they can scupper Scotland at source, if they can stop their big ball carrying forwards from going forward and make the ball scrappy and try and pick the ball off at times, but just make it scrappy constantly and get Scotland to kick it back to them, that's very much the picture. If you can never give Finn Russell that clean quick ball, then certainly when he's a bit more rushed, that's when the mistakes come out of him, because he is going to try things even when he has dirty or sloppy balls, so you want to try and create that environment for him. And then just to pivot onto the set piece, we did build up. It's a huge battle. I don't quite know what to expect at it. Obviously, Scotland have come fresh from beating Georgia last week, which is a very renowned scrum. But Sutherland and Fagerson in the partnership, we were already saying they're taking names, and they definitely are. Thomas Francis would be another one. It's wisdom that he's come straight into the Welsh team. I don't think that Dylan Lewis or anyone else would have been quite up to the job in terms of containing Sutherland and his scrummaging prowess at the moment, but Thomas Francis rarely goes backwards at scrum time.
And actually the inclusion Rowlands again, who I'll say Rowlands and Alan Wynne-Jones is a hefty lock partnership. It gives them a little bit of extra impetus from the engine.
I tell you, Cummings and Gray is hefty
too. They're two big Northern Hemisphere packs going smashing into each other, and if 100%. It's a wet day, the set piece could become very pivotal, because the drop balls will come, scrums will be there, so it's going to be a battle. I'd expect a tit for tat. I think probably there'll be a little bit on either side before one gets the edge. That's usually the way these contests go. But I'm not sure if someone.
I find it hard to bet against the Scottish scrum at the moment.
Yeah.
It's very, very strong. They're very, very, as I say, they're very settled front seven.
Yeah.
And they're putting an emphasis on their scrum game in a big way. And
Yeah.
Wales, as good as Thomas Francis is, their scrum hasn't been that great.
No, but
struggling with everybody.
It's true, but one thing I would say for Wales, in terms of just a traditional point, because I know we've gone there with that intention. I've seen England do it as well. In Wales, when a big bullying pack comes with a mind towards scrumming for penalties, they show a really good ability to lock it down when they need to, even against all form and against all kind of prevailing wisdom. If they can just lock the scrum down, if it doesn't move at all, then that's Wales getting their picture right, because it's just one of those avenues of success for Scotland, scrubbed off, and then you go into taking off the others, chop the ball carriers, stop the Finn passing game. It's step one for Wales is with Thomas Francis, just lock it down.
100%.
Yeah, that's going to be the goal for them, whereas Scotland I think will try and scrum for penalties and territory.
I think at line out as well, it's probably going to be tit for tat, but I'd say for the most part parity. Scotland do like to strike off line out. You got 20 metres between the back lines. It is an opportunity for Finn and the boys, so I would expect some level of competition coming in there from Alan Wynne.
For sure.
From a Scottish point of view, Fraser Brown's darts pretty good. Occasional overthrows, but other than that, pretty good.
Yes. I think in terms of poachers at the line out, I think I've seen Blade Thompson be effective in that capacity in terms of poaching.
Alan Wynne, obviously.
Alan Wynne is the big one.
Yeah.
The Springboks lost one line out in the World Cup, and it was to Alan Wynne Jones.
Yeah.
So be careful of Alan Wynne Jones, especially wind and rain. Yeah, you kind of can be sloppy.
That's, you think so that Southern wants to take control of the game at the scrum, Alan Wynne wants to take control of it at the line out, and certainly if Scotland win a penalty and kick it up the pitch and have the line outs picked off them, it's no good.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other restart is obviously the other set piece is the restart. It'll be crucial in terms of just getting yourself into a good area. It would be nice to see both sides just switched on and exiting efficiently off it, because that's kind of what you want to do. You don't want to be like kicking deep is the prevailing one, bringing in a good press, try and get them to kick the ball out on the full or kick the ball out at around 10 metre line and create an offensive strike play from it. That's become the best restart in the game, and
that's more certainly the trend. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it bounce the other way with somebody trying like little cheeky ball recovery ones off restarts, but certainly for the time being, teams are just pounding the ball deep, and I wouldn't expect, especially in a potentially wet and windy Parc Y Scarlets, either side to do anything else. What I will say is that Scotland sometimes do have a habit of switching off at restarts and dropping balls.
Can't afford to do that, especially if after a crucial score away from home in a game that you normally lose or a fixture you normally lose, to be coughing up cheap turnovers off the restart is criminal. Just 100%. Granted, it's a losing picture. If it starts happening, Scotland are going to lose the game. So it's just little micro moments in the set piece. But then if you move on to Scotland, just in terms of what they need to do, because their picture is slightly different, when they have the ball, obviously Finn is straight back in as number 10. They didn't stick with Hastings or put Finn at 12 or any of that kind of potential stuff that was like a thought, but no, Finn is their key playmaker, key distributor.
Yeah, he's probably the best passer of a football, arguably the best distributor in Europe.
Yeah, so get him straight in there, and Hogg as well gives them a little bit of oomph from the back line. In terms of just a
Hogg
wide
is
option.
good. Like, he still has the speed. He doesn't need to do too much. Like, Hogg at 10 has never been a good thing. With Finn Russell in the team, he should just shackles off a little bit and focus on your running game, not your passing game.
Try and get it out wide. Find space, ride Finn's passes out into over ball watching defenders and kind of take the outside with it. Because Finn will be looking for the outside. As we said, the outside of Jonathan Davies' 13 channel. He likes testing 13s, does Finn. He really does.
Yeah, he does. He gives them all kinds of problems. Wingers as well. Like, whatever the picture is, if they get too narrow, he'll go crossfield kicks. If they push up too high, he'll chip it over your top. If they stand off at all, he'll pick the right pass. But certainly providing him with some clean ball, I think the key really is to get a bit of tempo into their game. I think when Scotland are at their absolute best, you think of like the England games, obviously, in 2019 in that second half, and in 2018 for that whole game. When they're at their absolute best, Ali Price looks great, and he's driving a really nice tempo, and because of his tempo, sides can't settle, nobody's getting their hands in. Their forwards are actually quite good at dynamic contacts in a bit of space.
They can play at that speed, which is good to see.
Exactly. So if they can get 3 sort of very quick rooks off 9, where they're not soaking the tackles and Wales aren't able to slow it down, where Hamish Watson and Richie are picking the right lines, putting a nice bit of footwork on and just getting past the contact. Their ball presentation needs to be good, and then Ali Price gets the ball and it's moved quickly, and Wales can't get any kind of blitz or rhythm going in their defence. And then you feed Finn Russell the ball. That's very much the Scottish picture.
And it's key as well from their point of view that the centres, in terms of like Harris and who's in at 12, Lang, just running good lines to try and sit down or just disrupt the kind of unsettled Watkin and Jay Davis in terms of the new partnership for Wales. Yeah, it's important that Scotland run good lines similar to off 9 once they're playing off Finn. The principle's the same, it's just the centres have the job to do. Run good lines, could be legitimate options such that you sit down and fold the defence, and then Finn will, if you are the correct option, he'll pick you, but he'll try and find the correct option as well. And that's got to be their picture. As far as like we know it'll be a big test. They need their ball runners, ball carriers winning contacts as well. It's first and foremost true. Like if they, like you said, get 3 quick phases off 9 where they don't
where they're not soaking, where they're not being pushed backwards, where they're forcing Wales, I should say, to soak.
Yes.
Those are definitely the pictures that they want. Another little variation I'd like to see. We talk about that outside the 13 shoulder. From a Welsh perspective, I'd love to see them put like a Hamish Watson or a Jamie Ritchie in that channel on their multi-phase, just in terms of offering something new and getting good matchups. I like the idea of Ritchie or Watson with Darcy Graham next to them on a matchup against a couple of Welsh backs, because if there is a soft tackle, Hamish will take it, and he's good enough that he'll look up and he'll link up with Darcy Graham, and that's one of your most dangerous players in space.
Yeah, sure, he grabbed a try very quickly last week against Georgia. He's looking in great form as Darcy Graham, and then even Maitland on the other wing, a bit less pace out and out. He's a bit more of a fullback.
Maitland's gone.
Or sorry, not Maitland.
Kinghorn.
Yes, Maitland is
has
gone.
His own issues.
He was dropped for COVIDed reasons, or for
barbarians
COVID
hijinks.
Yes, indeed. Blair Kinghorn on the other side is more of a converted fullback. So really, their wide danger men are Hogg and Darcy Graham.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that.
Yeah, so trying to get them into space, trying to manipulate the Welsh D such that you're creating that chance and putting Graham in. And to be fair to Scotland, more so than a lot of the home nations such as they are good at that. They are good at creating a multi-phase that ends up with their winger dotting down the try. It happened very quickly last week.
They strike off first phase and they strike off 14th phase. They tend to be patient enough. Obviously, with Finn Russell at 10, it takes a different picture where he's always trying to find tries.
Yeah.
And so, consistent slow phases can be more difficult to come by. But I'll tell you, in the rain, I mean, we spoke about this in the context of Welsh defence. If the sheets of rain are coming down and the 30-metre passes from Finn Russell are less of an option in the game, it's just much more high risk in that kind of weather. You might see them try and settle down and try and play a slower multi-phase game. I don't love it as an idea. I think it's arguably more part of Wales's winning picture than Scotland's, but they might get an idea about themselves winning those contacts and getting on top of them, and the Johnny Greys and the Cummingses getting on top of them in the tight 5 and trying to bully Wales. As good as Alan Wynne-Jones is he still up to the task in terms of taking direct contact from giant men at his age, or is he going to buckle?
He hasn't buckled yet. I think that is a more risky picture for Scotland. He
hasn't played that well this year.
No, it's true. But I still wouldn't think that that's Scotland's plan A. But I think if it ends up being the plan, and if they succeed at it, it's a terrible thing for Wales, but that would be a huge coming of age for this Scotland pack, because obviously
it feels like it's on the margins.
It could be, like it definitely could be a case of that. Away from home in Wales, for them to bully their pack would be huge. I'm not saying it's going to go down that way. In fact, I think if they try that and get repelled, that could be seismic in terms of their psychology, and it could actually cost them the game too. It's a risky one.
I would generally err on the side, definitely playing off 9 is no bad thing. They fancy their pack, they like their ball carriers, they think they're good at it. That's fine, but just doing it with a bit of speed, it makes all the world of difference. Quick rucks, not slow rucks.
Tempo has been key to this Scotland side for quite a while, so I hope they stick with it. And then just finally, when they don't have the ball, they need to be sure enough in the midfield, particularly with Chris Harris, similar to Jay Davis on the other side. The 13 is a big channel to try and defend. And Wales have been pretty good, under Pivac included, at exposing some softness in defences. They have been pretty good at heads up pictures. So if Wales generate a bit of quick ball and Scotland aren't are kind of buckled or fractured as a line, the mismatches you would fancy will be spotted by Wales and will be exploited.
They took a lovely try within opening minutes of the game last week against France, where they just, you know, it was from right to left, and they had an overlap and they executed it perfectly. Like, there wasn't a pass out of place.
Yeah. And
Wales are still very good at doing that. If Scotland lose their shape, if they find themselves soaking, if they find themselves in the back foot, Wales are bloody good at finding the try, and also Dan Biggar can cross-field kick. You know, he's definitely a handful himself as a 10 to deal with.
As much as like we have gone in on their defence being suspect, Wales under Pivac have probably even found a little bit more tempo and impetus in terms of their offensive game. They're finding tries out there, so the onus is on Scotland without the ball to firstly slow them up. Jacklers like Mish and all of these guys in there in the rucks, creating a harrying dogfight at the breakdown, which, to be fair, both of these sides have a tradition of doing, so it can become a bit of a scrap that way. But if it gets a little slower, Gareth Davis gets unsettled, and then they kick a lot more ball away rather than probing through multi-phase.
There's no question from Scotland's point of view, their defensive strengths don't really come from their back line.
No.
If that's where they're having to make defensive plays, they're always struggling with Jonathan Davis running at them. You know, it's more about stopping Wales at source. It's more about the back row and the tight five messing up the Welsh ball in the contacts. If Wales are trying to carry short, knocking them backwards, making sure they don't have a clean possession of the ball, getting even a hand in there, making everything slow, and then picking their moments when a Welshman is isolated. And Hamish Watson's really good at
creating them. To be fair, one of the things that Scotland have been very good at under Gregor as well is like even soaking a little bit of the tackle just so that like the guy gets in behind the defence just a fraction, thinks it's good, but there's actually a poacher there waiting, and it means that the support, they're just running away from the support and isolating them that way. I think they will look to do little plays like that as well against a slightly unsettled Welsh pack, but they'll try and bait them in and try and turn them over because they do have turnover men in both front row and back row. So source ball is what they're trying to disrupt. If they can't, big job for the back line to try and shut down what is a very, very dangerous looking Welsh offence.
It is, no question. And I suppose that brings us round the merry-go-round all the way to the predictions. What do you think's going to happen in this one?
I'm flipping with it. It's a tough one to call, especially given the circumstance being what it is. They're not quite playing for anything apart from pride and preparation. Normally I would err on the side of the home team, so I would err on the side of Wales just edging it as they normally have, but I actually think Scotland are probably the slightly better, more informed team, so it's a tough call for me.
It is. And also Wales won a Grand Slam last year, and you know they do like to back up Grand Slams. Historically speaking, if you go back to the aughts, they were very much a wooden spoon Grand Slam kind of team, and this could be very much the fallow year in that regard. But
it's true.
Five defeats in a row for Wales would be alarm bells.
Very
for
unprecedented stuff. That one, like as much as wooden spoons and things, that's a very terrible start. So the back's to the wall as far as
5 defeats in a row without playing any of the big 3 Southern Hemisphere teams. That would be not good for Wales. I think this is an important game, definitely for Wales. But I do like Scotland. I thought I was very impressed with them against Georgia. I know Georgia were sort of not at the pace.
It was their first game in months.
But they just did look good. They looked confident. They looked all on the same page. And you know, Scottish confidence is brittle at times, and I definitely think there's a win out there for Wales if they can disrupt them enough. But I don't know if I quite trust them at the moment. And while their backs are to the walls and they could prove me wrong, I think Scotland, as you say, are the slightly better team at the moment. And I think I'm going to pick Scotland for a narrow win.
Well, I'll pick Wales for a narrow win then for quarter.
23-19, something like that.
23-19. Yes. Okay. Well, with that, we'll move on.
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And hey, if you have an opinion of your own, if you disagree with what we're saying, leave a comment down below. We might just get back to you.